guys, this is Dr. Rayleigh over at Incline Chiropractic, Colorado. Today I have Miss Carmen Lackett with me. She's a midwife in Colorado Springs and the owner of Mother to Mother Midwifery. Carmen, thank you so much for joining me today and welcome to the interview.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So why don't you go ahead and start off by telling us a little bit about what it is that you do and more about your business.
All right. Well, I'm a home birth midwife, which means I only provide care for people who are intending to have their baby at home. I provide prenatal and postpartum care as well as help with the delivery of their baby. My office is open to families as their families, their young children are welcome to join them for their prenatal and postpartum visits so that everyone feels like they're part of the growing family.
Wonderful. So how long have you been in business for?
I've been in my own practice for 5 years, all over the city of Colorado Springs. I've moved a couple times. I started out doing home visits, but now I have an office in downtown Colorado Springs.
Wonderful. And you've been a midwife for how long?
5 years.
5 years? Wonderful. So how many mothers do you think that you've seen in the past 5 years?
Ooh, that's a good question. Probably in that time, probably a little over 100, maybe 150. A lot of them are repeats, so I'm guessing on that.
Yeah, wonderful. That's great. So how has COVID kind of affected your practice and seeing mothers at home? How has it affected your business?
You know, I don't like some of the things that it's done. One thing that it's really affected is, even though I'm considered essential, it has been nice that I can still see my clients in person. But because of the guidelines set out by WHO, I have tried to change my in-person visits and doing some more telemed, especially in the early part of the pregnancy, because it's not necessary that I get my hands on you for that part of the pregnancy, but it has been hard for me to do that because I do really like and value the in-person, intimate, one-to-one contact, and I feel like some of that is missing. Towards the end of pregnancy, though, I do see I see you more often for the in-person appointments.
Okay, so are you saying more like third trimesters whenever you do actually have to come in contact with that person so that you can do some of the testing and some of the different things?
I see my clients in the first trimester as well. So usually that first appointment is going to be an in-person appointment, just to establish care and to get blood work for the clients. And then I will see my clients again at 28 weeks. For that in-person, also 20 weeks as well. But the in-between where I would normally have seen you early or in-person, I'm doing more telemed. So I do see my clients throughout the whole pregnancy, not as much as I would typically doing the telemed in between.
Okay, so right now you're still seeing them at all stages. It's just more towards the end that you actually do the person.
Yes.
And have you noticed an increase in your practice? Have people not wanted to go to hospitals for birth and kind of switched over to you out of nowhere to try and avoid that hospital?
I have noticed an increase in phone calls for people who are concerned about being in the hospital and the possibility of getting COVID-19, or not being able to have a support person in their birth space is also something that is of concern. I've had some people switch over to me late to care, but I have not had a lot of them because really home birth is for lack of a better term, the cream of the crop. I mean, we can only do low risk pregnancies. So if there's anything that was high risk for a pregnancy, it's a lot of work to take on somebody late to care, which I'm happy to do. But if they're not happy to accommodate to that, it's a lot more work for them too. It's not just they can switch over to me and then everything is going to just work out exactly how they dreamed it would. So I've had a lot of conversations with people, but not every one of them has switched over to home birth.
Okay, so while we're on that topic, who is ideal for you to see? Who are the patients that you cannot have a home birth with, whether that's because they have, high blood pressure or they're anemic or whatever it is? What's the group of people that you can and cannot see?
So home birth is really for low risk clients, and those low risk clients are best observed throughout the pregnancy, because when we do that initial blood draw, we're going to see what kind of uh, how healthy they are, for lack of a better term, there, and see what we might need to work on. We cannot provide care for moms who are carrying twins. We can't deliver breech babies at home, and for good reason. We're low risk midwives for the healthy mom and baby. We can't have any clients who have preeclampsia or gestational diabetes or are anemic. So those things, starting from early on, can be controlled a lot with diet, which is why it's so important to seek out a midwife for your prenatal care early, so that we can really talk about diet and how eating is going to affect your pregnancy and help you not become one of the high-risk patients.
Yeah, and that's very important and a good point that health is really important before pregnancy, during pregnancy, and after pregnancy. So,
Absolutely.
and I know that can be a total bummer for people that have a dream of having babies at home, but it's just for their safety, whether they can or cannot have it. So what are some of the risks and benefits to having a baby at home versus?
Well, I don't know. I guess a risk to having a baby at home is that you'll never want to have a hospital birth once you've had a home birth. um, because I see my clients and know how healthy they are and that they're not high risk, I don't really feel like there is a risk to having a home birth, because birth works 85% of the time without any interventions, regardless of whether you choose a home birth or a hospital birth. That's just the way it works. That being said, there are higher risk if something does go wrong. It's going to take us longer to get to the hospital than if you were already at the hospital and something were to go wrong. But along with that, because I don't intervene and we let the body do its natural thing, most of the time we're not going to have those risky situations that often happen in the hospital, because we're not introducing medication to get labor started when maybe the body was not ready for it or something like that. The benefits, man, you get to sleep in your own bed, and you actually get to sleep in the first 24 hours of having a baby. You feel empowered because you did it without anybody else intervening, stepping in and telling you, oh, well, we could get this to go a little faster if we did this, or if we offered this, or, you come out of the experience knowing that you birthed your baby, and your baby's healthy and safe at home. Also, a benefit is that your family can be involved, especially during COVID-19. I don't really foresee that the Colorado Springs hospitals are going to start telling people that they can't have support people, but at this point, at home you can. And that might vary between practices, but in my practice, you can have the support people that you need to get you through some intense times of labor and delivery. So, I mean, I think the benefits so outweigh the possible negative things that's where I would always have my baby. And I actually did have home birth and hospital birth.
Oh, really? That's nice that you were able to compare yourself. I mean, I know that you're a midwife. You weren't always a midwife, is that correct?
That's correct.
So beforehand, is that kind of what made you want to switch over to midwifery?
Yes, I had my first baby at home and had a little bit of a complication, but then ended up having my second baby, intended a home birth, but his heart tones went down in labor. We drove ourselves to the hospital. It was a very non-emergent situation, but it was just to have everything checked out. And when we went to the hospital, the doctor then said I could have gone home if I wanted to, because they put him on a strip and he sounded fine, but I didn't want to be in labor again in the car, so I decided to stay. I mean, I didn't even have the horrible hospital birth experience, but my home birth with the complication I had for that versus my hospital birth, I would do a home birth 100 times over, just because I felt like I was being listened to. I knew I was being cared for by my midwife, and the hospital was just very, this is what we do. You're in here, and this is how far contractions are. We're going to give you Pitocin. We're going to break your water. You know, you don't have the options. I mean, you do have the options. You just have to fight for them much more in the hospital.
Yeah, I attended a birth recently, and it seemed like there was a procedure and they stuck to that procedure, and she was giving birth with the back labor, and I know that's not what she wanted to do, but I didn't even feel like I could say something about like, well, can we maybe try something else? I know that she wanted to try switching positions, but I mean, everyone was just kind of set in their ways and doing what they do, which is great. You know, if you're having a hospital birth, that's fine too. I know this can be kind of scary, especially if it's your first baby.
Right.
But, you know, Carmen is a wonderful resource to talk to. I've talked to her about several different topics related to birthing at home. And so, I mean, I would definitely recommend doing it at home if you can, if you are able. So what are some of the emergency procedures that you have? So something has happened or labor has stalled. Do you transport patients, or do you have the ambulance come and get them? Or kind of what is the worst case scenario? Now we have to go to the hospital.
Right. You know, every situation is different, so I can't say that there's just one protocol that I follow for every hemorrhage situation or whatever's going on. But as midwives that are registered in the state of Colorado, we are allowed to carry anti-hemorrhagic medications. So that is a very big question that many people have, is what if I hemorrhage? Then we carry Pitocin in injection form and Cytotec in case of that. And generally that gets the bleeding to stop. We also can use herbs to help with that. If that would be the first step I would probably take, and then medication if it didn't work with herbs. We can call 911. It's pretty rare to call 911. It's nice to have them available in case we need to, but it's not very common. Most times if we go to the hospital, it's a non-emergent transfer, meaning we're going to the hospital in our own cars, driving ourselves. We'll call the hospital or the doctor ahead of time and let them know why we're coming in, and so that they're aware that we're coming in and what is going on. COVID-19 has kind of changed that a little bit, in that only one support person is allowed to go with the birthing mom to the hospital. So in the case of, this hasn't happened to me yet, but in the case of having to transfer while there's no other people allowed in the hospital, it does look a little different than it used to. I would help get mom and dad to the hospital doors, get my labs and stuff faxed over to the hospital staff so that they have and know what's going on. And then I would just be on call for my clients via phone or text while they're in the hospital if they have questions to ask me while things are going on in the hospital.
So beforehand, were you able to go in with them and kind of transfer care that way? And did you stay with them, or would you like kind of just hand it off and let?
Yeah, I would stay with them. Yeah, so I would usually I don't have any hospital privileges, so it's not that I am your care provider anymore. We transfer care over to the hospital at that moment, but I would stay with the client and help them figure out position changes, or explain to them what the hospital staff is asking them to do or encouraging them to do, and kind of be able to be a sounding board. In the hospital, I don't know hospital protocol like they do. They have it set up a certain way. And so I really try to be the middleman to try to explain to the clients what's going on, because they've never done this. Some have never done this before. And also to help the hospital staff understand, because I had spent so much time with the client, the last 9 months, understand what they were hoping for their birth, and see if we could come to a middle ground and facilitate that.
Great. So who is it that you cater to? Is it specific for Colorado Springs, or do you come down to Pueblo and up to Denver and Castle Rock?
I do go anywhere. I like to kind of keep the travel distance within an hour. So I do have several clients in Pueblo, Canyon City. I'm happy to go to Castle Rock, lots of Calhan. Peyton, Colorado Springs. I'll go up to Woodland Park, Cascade area. I like to keep the distance about an hour because that will give me enough time, hopefully, most of the time, to be able to attend anybody who might have doubled up or something like that. So I don't have a lot of drive time between.
Okay, great. And as far as your charges go, you do have a set fee. You don't charge extra to travel anywhere, is that correct?
That is correct.
Great. And what are your fees? What do they look like, at least compared to the hospital? Because I know some people are just worried about, the price of having a baby. Can I use my insurance? So could you answer some of those questions for them?
Absolutely. My fee is $3,500, and that includes your prenatal care, your 6 weeks postpartum care for mom and well baby, and the birth of your baby. I am an out-of-network provider for insurance. So if you have out-of-network maternity coverage, then there could be coverage there. Each insurance plan is different, so there's no guarantee on any of that. I do bill labs and to insurance, and if you do need an ultrasound, I would send you to a doctor who accepts insurance for that, because that's considered standard of care. Both of those are standard of care in pregnancy. I don't know the costs for a normal birth at the hospital. I think the last I had heard is an unmedicated, very quick, you just go in, have a baby, and everything is normal. There's not interventions. I've heard is about $10,000 if you're doing a cash pay. But oftentimes interventions come with the hospital especially if you're going to be there for a long amount of time, just because the longer you're there, the more time they can try to offer help in other ways.
Sure. Especially some fees that you're like, oh, I didn't know I had to pay for that. And then you get the bill.
Yeah.
Oh, dang it. So what sets you apart from other midwives?
This is a hard question for me to answer, because I don't really work with a lot of other midwives. I mean, I have worked with a few. I would say we all have our own specialty, and I don't really know what my specialty is, other than I know that it's very empowering to me to watch a mom be empowered by her birth. And so when she realizes, when we spent the time prenatally to hear what she's hoping for, and things that have concerned her and worries that she's had, and then she comes out on the other side after having had a home birth. And a home birth is nothing to shake your finger at. Birth is painful. So when you see a mom get through that and be able to lean on her own strength and power to be able to birth her own baby, I really do enjoy watching that. And I know there's other midwives that do that too, but that to me is what's really important, and what I think people will find when they work with me.
Is that why you kind of do this? You just love seeing women after birth?
Yes. Well, and the toddlers. I don't know. The toddlers that come into the office, I really love them too.
So before we wrap this up, I have a fun mystery question for you.
Okay.
So today's question is, you find a winning lottery ticket for $10 million. What do you do next?
Oh, man. Am I a good citizen or am I not? If I'm a good citizen, I try to track down the person who really it belongs to.
Oh,
and maybe
nice.
It's just outside of their house or something like that. If I'm not a good citizen, I really like my family. And so I think I would want to buy land somewhere and get houses for all of my family to be close together, because that's the hardest part. My oldest is 21, my youngest is 8, and I feel like fortunately they all live at home currently, but I feel like they're going to be moving out soon, and that's kind of heart-wrenching.
Sure. That's so funny. I didn't even think about returning the ticket whenever I wrote that question down. So that shows how good of a person you are, that you at least want to try and find that person.
Well, what would you do with it?
Well, I would probably try and be a good person too now, right? And then, when I was a kid, I had a in-ground pool, and I feel like that was so big for us as kids to like learn how to swim, because you know
Mm-hmm.
that like little drowning babies, that happens more often than you know, and so
Right.
teaching your kids how to swim is huge. Plus I love having a pool too, so I probably put a pool in my backyard. That's the first thing.
Awesome.
Any last tips or pointers or anything else that you maybe want people to know before we're all done with our interview?
Um, maybe, I mean, if you're not sure, if you're on the fence about home birth, check it out. Read some good birthing stories. Check out Ina May Gaskin's books. She has some great books with really good birth stories in them. Home birth isn't for everyone, and that is completely understandable, but you might be surprised to find out that it isn't as hard as movies and Hollywood make birth seem, and you might be surprised that you could be a candidate for it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Carmen. If you guys are wanting to get a hold of her, her website is www.mothertomothermidwifery.net. I'll have that posted so that you can see it. Otherwise, just go to the website and it'll be easy for you to get in contact with her. So thanks again. And everybody else
Thank you for
out
having
there,
me.
yeah, of course. Be well, guys.